I remember the excitement like it was yesterday. James and I, hand in hand, stepping off the plane into the warm embrace of Bali's tropical air. Our honeymoon, a dream come true, a chance to escape the chaos of wedding planning and dive into the bliss of married life. The island was everything we imagined, lush, vibrant, and utterly breathtaking. We had planned this trip meticulously, every detail from the luxurious villa overlooking the rice terraces to the romantic dinners under the stars. The first evening was magical. We arrived at our villa just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. We unpacked, laughing over little things, the kind of laughter that only comes from shared joy. We were finally alone, just the two of us, with no interruptions. But then, as we were about to sit down for our first dinner together, James's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his smile faltering for just a moment. "It's my mom," he said, almost apologetically. I nodded, understanding the need for him to answer, but inside, I felt a twinge of disappointment. "Hi, Mom," James said, his voice warm but slightly strained. I could hear her voice through the phone, loud and demanding, even from where I sat. She was asking about our flight, the villa, whether we had eaten yet. The usual motherly concerns, but with an intensity that felt out of place. He tried to keep the call short, but she kept talking, her voice rising with each question. "Just let her talk," he whispered to me, a resigned look in his eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to push down the irritation. It was our honeymoon, after all. After what felt like an eternity, he hung up, offering a weak smile. "She just worries," he explained. I nodded, not wanting to start our trip with an argument, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The villa was silent again, save for the gentle rustle of the palm leaves outside. We sat down to eat, the food delicious and the wine flowing, but the call lingered in the air like an uninvited guest. That night, as we lay in bed, James's phone rang again. And again, every hour like clockwork, Margaret called. Each time James sighed, answered, and tried to reassure her that we were fine, that there was no need for her to worry. But with each call, my patience wore thinner, and the joy of our honeymoon began to feel overshadowed by this relentless intrusion. I watched him, his face illuminated by the phone's screen, his expression a mix of annoyance and resignation. This was supposed to be our time, our escape, but it seemed like Margaret had other plans. The sun rose over Bali, casting a golden glow over the rice terraces and making the morning feel like a promise. James and I woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the distant chatter of the village coming to life. We decided to start our day with a sunrise yoga session, the kind of peaceful beginning we had envisioned for our honeymoon. As we stretched and breathed in the fresh air, I could feel the tension from the previous night's calls melting away. But just as we were about to head to breakfast, James's phone rang again. He glanced at it, then at me, his eyes apologetic. "It's her again," he said, his voice low. I nodded, trying to keep the peace, but inside, I was growing more frustrated. We sat down at a quaint little cafe, the kind with bamboo furniture and flowers hanging from the ceiling. The aroma of coffee filled the air, and for a moment I thought we might be able to enjoy our meal in peace. But then, the phone rang again. And again. Every hour, on the hour, Margaret called. Each time, James answered, his voice growing more weary with each conversation. "Yes, Mom, we're fine. No, nothing's wrong. We're just enjoying our breakfast." I watched him, his face a mask of calm, but his body language betrayed his stress. He was trying to keep things normal, to not let her calls ruin our time, but they were like a persistent shadow over our day. We tried to make the best of it, exploring the markets, tasting local delicacies, and taking in the sights. But the constant interruptions made it hard to immerse ourselves fully in the experience. By lunch, I could see the strain on James's face, the way he tensed every time his phone buzzed. At one point, while we were walking through the Ubud monkey forest, a call came in. James sighed. "I'll just let her talk real quick," he muttered, stepping aside to answer. I watched him from a distance, his back turned to me, nodding along to whatever she was saying. His shoulders slumped slightly, and I knew this was far from the honeymoon we had planned. As the day wore on, the calls didn't stop. Dinner at a cliffside restaurant with a view of the ocean was interrupted not once, but twice. Each time, James tried to keep the conversation short, but Margaret's voice was insistent, demanding. By the time we returned to our villa, exhausted from the day's adventures and the emotional toll of the calls, I was at my breaking point. James flopped onto the bed, his phone ringing again. He looked at me, his eyes asking for permission to answer, and I just nodded, too tired to argue. He spoke to her, his voice a mix of frustration and resignation. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of our situation. This was supposed to be a celebration of our love, our commitment, but instead, it felt like we were being pulled apart by an invisible force, one that wouldn't let go. And as the night fell, with the stars beginning to twinkle above, I knew that tomorrow would bring more of the same. The honeymoon that was meant to be our escape was turning into a battleground for control, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could endure it. The second day dawned with the promise of adventure. We had planned a trek through the lush jungles of Bali, a chance to immerse ourselves in the island's natural beauty and to hopefully escape the constant interruptions. But as we laced up our hiking boots and applied sunscreen, I could see the tension in James's movements. His phone, now a symbol of our intrusion, lay silent on the bedside table. The trek was breathtaking, with the sounds of the jungle enveloping us in a symphony of life. For a while it felt like we had left the world behind, just us and the wilderness. We laughed, took pictures, and shared quiet moments of awe. But as we reached the halfway point, the phone rang again. James's face fell, and he stepped aside to answer. I watched him from a distance, his back turned, his voice low but urgent. The call lasted longer than usual, and when he returned, his face was pale. "She's worried something might have happened to us," he explained, his voice tinged with guilt. The afternoon was spent at a local spa, a treat to soothe our muscles after the hike. The tranquility of the spa, with its gentle music and the scent of lemongrass, should have been the perfect antidote to our stress. But even there, the phone rang. James, looking more exhausted than ever, answered. This time his mother's voice was louder, more insistent. As we left the spa, I could see the strain on James's face, the way his jaw clenched with each call. Our dinner at a local warung, where we sat on the floor eating traditional Balinese dishes, was meant to be a cultural experience. But it was interrupted not once, but twice. Each time James tried to keep the conversation short, but Margaret's voice was like a persistent echo, refusing to fade. By the time we returned to our villa, the mood was somber. James sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "I'm sorry, Em," he said, his voice breaking. She's always been like this." I sat next to him, placing a hand on his back. "We need to talk about this, James. It's not just about our calls. It's about us setting boundaries. This is our honeymoon." He nodded, his eyes meeting mine, filled with a mix of apology and resolve. "I know. I'll talk to her tomorrow. I promise." That night, as we lay in bed, the silence was heavy with unspoken words. I could feel the tension radiating from James, his mind undoubtedly racing with thoughts of how to handle his mother. The calls had become more than just an annoyance. They were a reminder of the control Margaret still held over him, even from thousands of miles away. The next day, I knew, would be a turning point. Either we would find a way to reclaim our honeymoon, or it would continue to be overshadowed by this relentless intrusion. As sleep finally claimed me, I made a silent vow to myself. This had to stop. Our honeymoon was about our love, our commitment, and it was time for us to take back control. The morning of the third day brought with it a sense of urgency. James and I sat on the balcony of our villa, the sun casting a warm glow over the rice fields, but the atmosphere was tense. We needed to address the elephant in the room, Margaret's constant calls. "I'll call her," James said, his voice firm but with a hint of reluctance. "I need to set some boundaries." I watched him dial, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and anxiety. This was the moment we needed to reclaim our honeymoon, to assert our independence as a couple. "Hi, Mom," James started, his tone gentle but resolute. "We need to talk about the calls." I could hear her voice through the phone, loud and clear, even from where I sat. She was defensive, questioning why we couldn't just answer her calls, insisting that she was only worried. James listened patiently, nodding along, but when he spoke again, his voice was stronger. "Mom, we're on our honeymoon. We need this time to be just about us. I love you, and I appreciate your concern, but we need some space. Please, for the next few days, can you let us have that?" There was a long pause. I held my breath, waiting for her response. When she spoke, her voice was softer, tinged with a mix of understanding and hurt. "All right, James. I'll try, but you must promise to call me if anything goes wrong." James promised, and after a few more minutes of conversation, he hung up. He looked at me, his eyes searching for approval. "I think she understood," he said, a small, hopeful smile playing on his lips. The rest of the day felt different. There was a lightness to our steps as we explored the ancient temples of Bali, the calls no longer hanging over us like a storm cloud. We laughed freely, shared stories, and took in the sights without the constant buzz of the phone. Lunch at a local eatery was delightful, the food bursting with flavors, and we savored each bite without interruption. James's phone remained silent, and with each passing hour, the tension that had been building up seemed to dissipate. In the afternoon, we decided to visit the famous Tanalot Temple, watching the sunset from the cliffs. The sky turned into a canvas of oranges, pinks, and purples, and for the first time since we arrived, I felt like we were truly on our honeymoon. Dinner was at a beachside restaurant, the sound of the waves our only soundtrack. We talked about our future, our dreams, and for a moment, it felt like we were in our own world, untouched by outside forces. But as the night deepened and we returned to our villa, the silence was broken by the vibration of James's phone. He glanced at it, then at me, his face a mix of concern and determination. "It's her," he said, his voice steady, "but I'm not going to answer." I nodded, understanding the weight of his decision. This was more than just a call. It was a test of our resolve, of the boundaries we had just set. We lay in bed, the phone silent now, and I could feel the shift in our relationship. James had stood up to his mother, not out of defiance, but out of love for us, for our future together. It was a small victory, but a significant one. As sleep claimed us, I knew that the next day would be different. We had reclaimed our honeymoon, and in doing so, we had taken a step towards defining our marriage on our terms. The journey was still ahead, but this moment, this turning point, was a promise of what we could achieve together. The fourth day in Bali felt like a rebirth. The air was lighter, the sun brighter, and the tension that had been our constant companion had finally lifted. James and I woke up to the sound of the ocean, the gentle waves a soothing reminder of our newfound peace. We decided to spend the day at the beach, a simple yet profound choice, to reconnect with each other and with nature. The sand was warm under our feet, and the sea was inviting, its turquoise waters calling us to dive in. We swam, we laughed, and we talked about everything except the calls that had once overshadowed our time. Lunch was a picnic on the beach, with fresh fruits, local delicacies, and the occasional splash of water from the playful waves. James's phone remained in our bag, forgotten, and it was as if the world outside our little paradise had ceased to exist. In the afternoon, we took a boat to a secluded island, where we snorkeled among vibrant coral reefs, the underwater world, a testament to the beauty of letting go. We watched in awe as schools of fish darted around us, their colors a stark contrast to the clear blue water. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange, we sat on the beach, watching the day fade into night. James wrapped his arms around me, and I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body, the strength of our bond. "It feels different now, doesn't it?" he whispered, his voice filled with a quiet joy. I nodded, my head resting on his shoulder. "It does. It feels like we've started over. Dinner was at a small, intimate restaurant where we shared stories of our childhood, our dreams, and our fears. The conversation flowed effortlessly, without the shadow of interruption. We were just two people in love, celebrating our commitment to each other. That night, back at the villa, we sat on the balcony, the stars above us like silent witnesses to our journey. James's phone, now a symbol of our reclaimed independence, lay silent in the corner. We talked about the future, about the life we wanted to build together, free from the constraints of others' expectations. "I'm proud of you," I said, looking into his eyes, "for standing up, for us." James smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. "I'm proud of us. We did this together." As we lay down to sleep, I felt a sense of closure, a chapter ending and a new one beginning. The honeymoon was no longer just a celebration of our marriage. It had become a testament to our strength as a couple, our ability to navigate challenges, and our commitment to each other. The next day would be our last in Bali, but it felt like the beginning of something much larger. We had faced a test, and through it, we had grown closer, more united. The calls had been a storm, but we had weathered it, emerging stronger, ready to face whatever came next. And as sleep enveloped me, I knew that this was not just the end of our honeymoon, but the start of our real journey together, one where we would continue to set boundaries, to protect our love, and to build a life on our terms. The future was ours to shape, and we were ready for it. The last day of our honeymoon in Bali arrived with a bittersweet taste. The sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden light over the villa, signaling the end of an adventure but the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. We had reclaimed our time, set boundaries, and found strength in each other, but now it was time to return to reality. We decided to spend the morning exploring a local market, where the vibrant colors and the cacophony of voices were a stark contrast to the tranquility of our villa. We bought souvenirs, trinkets that would remind us of our journey, not just through Bali, but through our first real test as a married couple. Lunch was at a small, family-run warung, where we enjoyed a traditional Balinese meal. The flavors were rich, the spices a testament to the island's culinary heritage. We savored each bite, knowing it might be our last for a while. The conversation was light, filled with laughter and plans for the future. In the afternoon, we took a leisurely walk along the beach, hand in hand, the sand warm beneath our feet. We talked about the trip, about how it had changed us, and how we would carry forward the lessons learned. The sea was calm, the waves gentle, as if Bali itself was giving us a moment of peace before we left. As the sun began to set, we returned to our villa to pack. The room, once a haven from the world, now felt like a cocoon we were reluctant to leave. We packed slowly, taking time to reminisce about each item, each memory it held. Dinner was at our favorite restaurant, the one where we had shared our first meal in Bali. The ambiance was romantic, the food exquisite, and the company, as always, the best part. We toasted to our honeymoon, to the trials we had overcome, and to the many more adventures we would share. Back at the villa, we sat on the balcony one last time, the night air cool against our skin. James's phone, which had been silent for days, lay on the table. He picked it up, a thoughtful look on his face. "I'm going to call her," he said, referring to his mother. "Not because I have to, but because I want to. I want to thank her for understanding, for giving us this time." I nodded, understanding the importance of this call, not just for him, but for us. It was a step towards healing, towards building a relationship on our terms. The call was brief, filled with love and gratitude. James's voice was calm, his words sincere, and when he hung up, he looked at me with a smile. "She said she's proud of us." We spent the rest of the evening in quiet reflection, lying in bed, our bodies close, our minds at peace. The silence was no longer heavy with tension, but filled with the comfort of our bond. As sleep claimed us, I thought about the journey we had undertaken. This honeymoon had been more than just a vacation. It had been a journey of self-discovery, of setting boundaries, and of asserting our independence as a couple. We had faced a challenge, not from the outside world, but from within our own family dynamics, and we had emerged stronger, more united. The next morning, as we left Bali, I knew that while our honeymoon was over, our real journey together was just beginning. We had learned to protect our love, to stand up for each other, and to navigate the complexities of family with grace and determination. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Together, we could face anything. The journey back home was filled with a mix of emotions. The plane ride was a time of reflection, of looking back at the days in Bali that had changed us in ways we couldn't have anticipated. We held hands, our fingers intertwined, a silent promise of solidarity. As the plane descended, the familiar sights of our city came into view. The skyline, the bustle of life, the familiar yet now slightly alien environment greeted us. We were back to reality, but we were different, stronger, ready to face whatever awaited. At the airport, we were greeted by friends and family, their faces bright with joy at our return. There was an eagerness in their eyes, a curiosity about our trip, but also an unspoken understanding of the space we had claimed for ourselves. James's mother was there too, her smile genuine, her hug warm. There was a new respect in her eyes, an acknowledgement of our boundaries. The drive home was filled with stories, laughter, and the comfort of being back in our own space. Our apartment, once just a place to live, now felt like a sanctuary, a testament to our commitment to each other. Over the next few days, life resumed its pace. Work, chores, the mundane tasks of everyday life awaited us. But there was a difference. We approached everything with a new perspective, a deeper understanding of each other, and a resolve to protect our relationship. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, James brought up the topic of boundaries again. "We need to keep this going," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Not just with my mom, but with everyone. Our time together is precious." I agreed, knowing that the lessons from Bali were not just for the honeymoon, but for our entire life together. We discussed how to maintain our connection amidst the busyness of life, how to ensure our relationship remained a priority. The following weekend, we invited friends over, sharing stories of Bali, but also of the challenges we had faced and overcome. There was a sense of pride in our voices, not just for the adventure, but for the growth we had experienced. James's mother called, and this time, there was no tension. The conversation flowed easily, filled with updates and laughter. We had found a new normal, one where love, respect, and boundaries coexisted. As the weeks turned into months, we made time for each other, for adventures, for the simple joys of life. We continued to set boundaries, not out of defiance, but out of love for each other and for our family. Each challenge, each conversation, was a step towards building a life on our terms. 1 year later, on the anniversary of our honeymoon, we returned to the same beach in Bali where we had found our strength. The sand was still warm, the sea still inviting, but this time there was no storm on the horizon, only the promise of a future built on the lessons of the past. As we watched the sunset, James turned to me, his eyes filled with love and determination. "This was just the beginning," he said, his voice steady. "We've learned to navigate the waves, and we'll keep doing so, together." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I knew he was right. Our honeymoon had been a turning point, a journey of self-discovery, and now, back in Bali, it felt like a homecoming, not just to a place, but to ourselves, to our relationship, and to the life we were building, one day at a time.